Good morning. This is Debra V. Wilson. I am in Canada. It is Saturday, the 16th of December, 2017. The time is 900 hours and 56 minutes, and that's GMT minus 6. Today I'm going to focus on an episode from ITV Israel Daily. The program is called One-on-One with Alan Dershowitz. It's the program from the 14th of December 2017, and it's hosted by Natasha Kirchek. The program is approximately nearly 30 minutes, but I'm only going to focus on one segment. And it's the segment I'm going to focus on is the missing Israeli-Ethiopian Avera Mengistu. Mr. Mengistu on the 7th of September walked from Israel to Gaza and has since been unheard from. I want to be precise as possible. He has been detained. He, of his own volition, crossed over into Gaza. The young man it has been reported, has suffered from mental illness. It is believed that he has been interrogated by Hamas during this time. It is also believed by some in the Israeli-Ethiopian community that not enough has been done by the state to determine both his whereabouts and his status, if he's okay, and what state he might be in, because he is from a minority community in Israel, aka he's black. And the point of this program, One-on-One with Alan Dershowitz, is you pose the question to him and the professor opines. But for the purposes of my brief analysis, I'm not going to focus on Mr. Dershowitz's response, but more so on the response of another guest. That guest would be Eli Bahar, most recently, who is doing volunteer work to assist with the return of Mr. Mengistu, to determine his whereabouts and his state of being, his status, and to facilitate, where possible, returning him home. So in the program, this particular segment, Mr. Mengistu's cousin, she gives us a brief synopsis of what happened to her cousin and the immediate family's concern that the state has not done enough to help him. But that the concern of the immediate family also reflects larger concerns within Israel's Ethiopian community about the way in which this situation has been handled. So the interesting thing about Mr. Bahar is that he used to work for the Shabak, Israel's security agency, Israeli security agency, the internal security intelligence community. So the reason I'm focused on this particular segment and Mr. Bahar as opposed to Mr. Professor Dershowitz is I'm in exploration of an understanding of how marginalized communities with politically constructed identities experience state-constructed security modeling. So while Mr. Bahar was not a spy, he worked in a legal capacity with the Shabak. Nevertheless, for me, it's informative for me that whilst he was in an organization that is a traditional construct of state security, a spying agency, it's interesting, even though it was in a legal capacity, it's interesting that after his departure, he is in other ways engaged with state security through his volunteer work from the bottom up. And it's interesting for me because I am in a perpetual state of trying to understand collectively, and in cases like this where I might individually glean some insight into people who go into this type of work, what is your construct of security? Who do you deem worthy of security? And how does that play out in real time? So, particularly in a case like Israel, where people tend to construct Israel's security modeling from hyperbolic from a hyperbolic binary perspective. Either you think Israeli security modeling is God's gift on earth, or you construct it as it's Satan among us and they're getting away with murder. So it's particularly interesting for me to get a glimpse where I can of people who have had a career in Israel's security modeling, and to just have a basic understanding of what they were doing within the state constructed security modeling, and then once they leave it, how do they conduct their lives as quote unquote civilians. So I have a list of, and the links to some of the organizations Mr. Bahar is associated with. One is the Israel Democracy Institute, and then an organization, the Wexner Foundation, and how that plays into his activism. I would believe that's the right word. His activism in assisting with Mr. Mengistu's situation. And also I have included links on Mr. Mengistu and the situation and some history on how it is understood and experienced by the minority community in Israel, Israeli-Ethiopians. Look at it, ask questions, and think. And think and understand. Or just if you look at this situation as a minority group in Israel and how they are experiencing this situation, and then look at Mr. Bahar, who comes from a state constructive security. Again, he was in the legal realm, but still, and how when he's moved back out from the state constructive security into the civil society, how he perceives himself and continuing security for Israel. Maybe I'm making some leaps, but I am. And in addition, I want to remind you of a documentary from 2012, The Gatekeepers, and that documentary talked to 5 former Shabak directors and 1 current one. And if you can get a hold of that, take a look at it. Particularly now all 6 of the men are former directors. But take a look at the documentary, because at the time one was a sitting Shabak director, Yuval Diskin, and the other 5 gentlemen were former. And take a look at how they conducted their lives after they left the Shabak. And again, keep in mind the question that I'm asking: How do marginalized communities experience state security modeling? How do state security models, when they're being created, who do they construct as being worthy of security? Who do they construct as being who and what do they construct as being a threat? This is Debra V. Wilson. Take a look, read, do some follow-up, think, and ask questions. Thank you.
All right, Professor Dershowitz, turning to our next topic. This is a story that has been plaguing Israel for years now. In September of 2014, an Ethiopian Israeli man crossed into the Gaza Strip from Israel. Avera Mengistu was then captured and interrogated by Hamas and has been missing ever since. Mengistu had crossed into the Strip on his own accord, but had been suffering from mental illness for several years. His family has been pleading for help, claiming the Israeli government is not helping return Mengistu because of his Ethiopian ethnicity. Now, here is a message from his cousin.
Hi, this is Avera Mengistu. I'm Yonit, and I'm a cousin and neighbor of the Mengistu family. I grew up with Avera. I knew him. He was a charismatic young boy. His illness was hard for the family, but it doesn't compare to what they are going through since he was captured. I see the mother, the father, the brothers and the sisters living a life in the shadow of his absence. Life has stopped for this family, and this is nothing compared to what Avera must be going through. Save him.
Now, before you respond, Professor, joining us now in the studio is Eli Bachal, who served as the chief legal advisor for the Israeli Security Agency, otherwise known as the Shabak or Shin Bet. Eli currently works at the Israel Democracy Institute, but has been volunteering his time as the member of the committee for Avera Mengistu alongside other members of the Wexner-Harvard program, such as your friend Danny Grossman and former Consul General Nadav Tamir. Eli, thank you so much for joining us. Now, why isn't Israel taking more action to get this man released? We saw the Gilad Shalit prisoner exchange take place. How is this different?
I don't want to criticize anyone, and the government just nominated the new coordinator to negotiate, the chief negotiator regarding the Israelis that are captured by the Hamas. But I think that after more than 3 years that Avera Mengistu is there, and there is no sign of life from him, it's time to push things forward and to give and to put a lot of pressure, international and in Israel, to bring anything from him, sign of life, and him back here to Israel.
But what's so interesting is that this doesn't seem to be a major issue here in Israel. The Israeli public isn't talking about this very frequently.
Well, that's a problem, and I think that we the volunteers are trying to bring more solidarity within the Israeli society and to the Jewish people. Tonight, the family is going to the US, participating in the General Assembly of the Jewish Federations in Los Angeles for this exact purpose, and then move to Washington, D.C. and to New York City to meet with officials, with congressmen, and others from the UN, and trying to gain support to their struggle to see their son back home.
Professor, why do you think that this man has not yet been released and Israel hasn't been working harder to make that happen?
Well, first, we don't know how hard Israel is working behind the scenes, but the one thing I would categorically reject, certainly from the American Jewish community, and I suspect from the Israeli Jewish community, I do not think this has anything to do with race or with his color. I'll tell you why. If he were a soldier who were captured and being held hostage, I think every American Jew and I think every Israeli would be demanding his immediate release. I think the distinction is not that he's Ethiopian and Gilad Shalit was not. It's that Shalit was a soldier and was captured. Here's a man who wandered as a result of tragic mental illness, but nonetheless wandered over the border illegally. It's a strong, compassionate case, but it's not as strong a case from the point of view of Israel's policy of leaving no one behind, never allowing a soldier to remain behind. I will work as hard as I can for Avera's release, but I don't think it should be blamed on race, certainly not race alone, because I really do believe to the depths of my heart that if an Ethiopian Jewish soldier were captured by Hamas during a battle or tragically killed and his body not recovered, I do think that Israel would be devoting as much effort to getting back a black soldier as a white soldier. And I'd have to see very, very strong evidence to the contrary to persuade me that race was the critical factor here, rather than his status as a non-soldier who wandered over the border as the result of mental illness. Compassionate, yes, but the strongest, as strong a case as Gilad Shalit? No, I don't believe it.